is Drink Talk, where we try to solve the world's problems one drink at a time. Each episode in this podcast, we talk about the topics of yesterday, today, and tomorrow while reviewing and enjoying beer, spirits, and wine from around the world and crafted locally. So grab your drink, raise your glass, and join us. We are your hosts, Brian and Britt. Cheers.
Check us out. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a wonderful broadcast of Drink Talk. I am sitting here with Paul, the owner of La Bouillon, down in the Old Market. We're down on Howard Street. Paul, let's just get a little greeting from you and explain how you got here and all that sort of jazz.
Yeah, do you want me to go ahead and open a bottle here? So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is Drink Talk. This is how we do it.
I mean, it seems right in the end of the world. So yeah, my name is Paul Kulik, and I'm a proprietor here at La Bouillon. Also, Howard Street Wine, which is connected to us, where we have a wine merchant, kind of bottle shop, also serves as our wine list. And then also connected to Via Farina, the wood-fired pizza, fresh pasta location down on 10th Street, next to the Blue Barn Theater.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you've got a few locations.
Yeah, yeah, a couple locations, plenty to do. So yeah. So Bouillon opened. Let's see, it'll be 7 years this year. It'll be the end of November 2013 is when the restaurant opened, and so.
What do we got here first?
All right. Well, so this is actually a grape that's from the sort of really affected area in northern Italy with coronavirus. This is a grape called Vespolina from the Novarese or Colligny Novarese region, which is a kind of larger appellation located in northern Piedmont, neighboring Lombardia, which is really the epicenter of the Italian coronavirus outbreak. The grape is called Vespolina. It's really only grown in this tiny little northern Piedmontese Lombardian kind of border. It's kind of pre-Alp area, hilly, more volcanic soils, and this is probably more famously Nebbiolo country. And Nebbiolo is a very tannic, austere, regal, and Vespolina is a little bit more playful.
Sure.
The better way to think of that is if Nebbiolo is to Pinot Noir, Vespolina is to Gamay. So that's just something we can drink here.
So what you're telling me is this bottle of wine is probably going to be no more for a little while at least due to the corona outbreak.
I don't know how that's going to affect production. Truthfully, that's something that this is also moving so quickly. It's tough to say how that's going to affect what that does. Now, this is typically a dormant period, so there's not a lot of work being done on the fields.
Sure.
Thankfully. So before the bud break and all that happens. So from a labor standpoint, the vines couldn't be better suited for there to be no labor done to them.
Okay.
Because pruning tends to happen in January, and so this is the time actually where winemakers travel around the world and try to sell their wine.
Perfect.
So,
but not perfect.
They're
with the whole
they're,
travel
they're
restrictions.
sequestered, right? So now, but what that does to the international market, who knows?
Yeah.
There's so many trials and tribulations this year. It's kind of tough to keep track of them all.
Yeah. Well, cheers.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. That is.
Isn't that delightful?
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
Smooth.
Mm-hmm.
Right off the gate. No harshness to it. Kind of like tastes like an old vine.
Yeah.
Like it's been around for a while. Not old vine like Zin, but
well, what you're getting is soil. I mean, this is grown in a kind of a volcanic soil. Minerality is such a key component to European wine. There's a really pleasant, prickly kind of acidity, kind of tart note. Italian wine tends to finish with a little bit of bitterness. This doesn't. And then, as opposed to Nebbiolo, which is very tannic, that super drying effect at the end of the palate.
yeah.
This is more built around acidity, so you can kind of get that. You got
that.
You get your salivation going on, and it's a pleasant, easy drinking, delicious, delightful wine, especially as we transition to spring here. And so we were pouring that by the glass at the restaurant, and it's super affordable too. It's like 20-ish bucks. So
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Which leads us into, where we're at down here. We're actually, if those of you who don't know where this is situated at, down on Howard Street, we're about 11th or 12th.
Yeah. We're in the intersection of where the old market kind of started. So,
Yeah.
in fact, we were occupying the space that I like to think or credit for having started the old market in the first place. So, not entirely true, but I'm happy to tell the story. So, we're between 10th and 11th on Howard Street, kind of truly in the heart of the old market.
That's
And,
great.
So this space, we're called Le Bouillon, or Bouillon, which apparently is much more difficult to pronounce than I had intended when we conceived the name. Bouillon comes from, it's a type of restaurant that was sort of popularized in the turn of the last century in France. It was bouillon means broth. You
Yes.
probably have heard of
Or I was going to say soup. In my
Yeah.
case, I would have
Well,
thought
think
of that as soup.
Yeah, I think bouillon cube or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
And so
Makes sense.
I grew up speaking French. I mean, learned it through school and spending time in France, and so I sometimes I'll just forget how difficult that language is to pronounce. But bouillon, other than being the cube and a broth and sort of the foundation of what restaurants kind of build everything over,
Right.
just sauces and stocks to go for the sauces. The bouillon really refers back to these restaurants that were created or established right around the 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s. France was going through a ton of political turmoil. It would go from a monarchy to a republic to another republic, sort of kind of cascading through governments, shedding one off after another. And there was a lot of problems with food distribution, a lot of famine, etc. And so the government was doing what it could to try to price support and do different things to try to preserve French culture, because the French are very, very connected with their cuisine. And so the government created these restaurants, these bouillon. I think in the States we refer to them as soup kitchens, actually. They're really elegant spaces, and they were intended to preserve French culture through food. And so a lot of the dishes that were served in those places were everyday worker-type dishes. And there are a few that still exist in Paris and kind of throughout France. If you go to them, you would never in a million years think that this was like a government-subsidized
No.
restaurant.
No, not
They're
at all.
gorgeous temples to cuisine, but the prices are always accessible, and you'll see dishes that are very familiar. And so we took that as like a foundational concept for the restaurant, because this is such a key historical space.
Correct.
Yeah.
And let's go into that. The people that don't, like I said, know where this is at, this is the Old French Cafe. And I don't know if you know a little bit about the French Cafe. My uncle, Craig Roeder, actually did the lighting for the French
Is that
Cafe.
right?
Yeah, he also used to work at the French Cafe when
Okay.
they first opened.
Yeah.
So this place has a lot of historical value in my heart, due to my uncle and all that stuff. So I'm glad that you took over the space. We're in your mirror room. Is that what you called it?
We still call it the mirror room, yeah.
And
For good reason.
Yeah,
if
you
you're-
can
if
kind of
you're
see this
watching
warping like it goes for on forever in the
The
camera here.
The infinity mirrors, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And this is just one of multiple spaces that you have in this building. You've got
Yeah.
a wine cellar kind of behind me.
Yeah, so we've taken, if you can, I don't know how much more relevant it is kind of talking about it in French Cafe terms, but the French Cafe, let me just backtrack and kind of tell a little bit of the history of the space, and then it'll help kind of understand how things are laid out here. So the French Cafe occupied a space called the Galinsky Fruit Company. And the fruit company was in the heart of the old market. The old market's called the old market because this used to be the fruit and vegetable warehouse district, which some people may remember. And so if you were walking down the street in, say, 1955, you would have seen one wholesale grocer after the next. And those would be places that you would go to pick up flour or bananas, citrus, whatever. If you had a grocery store or if you had a hotel, you'd come to the old market and you'd pick that stuff up. That's kind of how distribution worked at the time.
Yeah.
And so kind of flash forward a little bit to the 1960s, and things stopped being transported via rail. More and more trucks were taking over that job. So everything was getting shuffled around, and Omaha in general kind of took a gigantic hit, but the old market stopped being that warehouse district, and so all these wholesalers were moving from the old market area out to other areas that were more accessible by truck. And so a lot of these storefronts were emptying out. Now, why that's relevant is that the person who, the landlord for most of the properties down here, was a gentleman named Sam Mercer. And Sam Mercer had inherited the properties from his father, who was Surgeon General of the Union Pacific Railroad. So he'd come here as Omaha was being founded, helped lay out not only the old market, but a lot of the boulevard system, the train lines, the streetcar lines that kind of ran Omaha really around 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Built the Walnut, what is it called? It's a Walnut Hill. It's over on 40th and Cumming.
Walnut Historia?
No. The neighborhood on 40th and Cumming. So you probably have seen what looks like kind of the creepy manor up there. That's the Mercer Mansion. That neighborhood, that hilltop neighborhood next to Bemis Park, that was developed by I think it's Samuel Mercer. I can't remember his first name.
Now,
that would be the grandfather. So
am I to be corrected, but Mercer's had a loft here that may have been set on fire?
Yeah, let me get to that, because the history is so storied, and the Mercer family is so integral to the history of the old market, but I think in pretty much all things that are meaningful and cultural in this town going back 120 years. Can't divorce them. So at the time, Sam Mercer lived in Paris. So when you walk through the front doors of the restaurant, you're going to see all this weird kind of watercolory type paintings, and you're going to see this weird sort of tree sculpture at the back of the restaurant. And if you're wondering what that is, the paintings are all from Sam Mercer. And the tree comes from one of his colleagues, friends, at the time, a woman named Nikki St. Paul. And why that's relevant is because he was really deeply immersed in this movement of artists. They're called the Nouveau Realiste.
Yeah.
And
I've heard of that.
They're world renowned. Her work, Nikki's work, is really everywhere. She passed away in 2002. And Sam was just kind of immersed in these people. Now, he's living in Paris. He's an attorney by trade. He's painting, and this is his milieu. This is who he's spending time with. And he's got these properties back in Omaha. Now, they're emptying out, but he lives half a world away.
Yeah.
So not super connected
not
to
hurting
it.
him too much. I mean, yeah, he's losing money.
I mean, in as much as it's a headache to have to go back and deal with. He hadn't really spent much time in Omaha. He didn't really grow up in Omaha. So in the meantime, back here, there were a group of people who had this kind of vision of transforming the neighborhood. This is the era, this is the 60s now, the era of kind of the counterculture movement, and there was some thought, two in particular, a guy named Cedric Hartman, and Judy now Wigton, had a store called The Afternoon that they'd opened.
I know that store.
And they had been going to Chicago to pick up a bunch of different goods, and they would resell them in Omaha, and they'd spent a lot of time in Old Town Chicago, and they thought, hey, this neighborhood would be a really great, the old market that is, would be a really great place to duplicate what's happened in Old Town. It'd be kind of cool if we could make that happen. Of course, they had no money, they didn't have the opportunity to do that, but they just kind of were
I got this idea.
Yeah, these 20-year-old dreamers, And at any rate, they knew the daughter of the family that owned this building. So this building, what the French Cafe and now Bouillon is located in, was the Galinsky Fruit Company. And their daughter was named Peaches Galinsky, which is a great touch.
Peaches.
Yeah, isn't that great?
Love it.
Was friends with this other group of folks. There's a broad, lots of names of people who ended up really helping transform the neighborhood. And so the story goes that one winter day when Sam was in town checking in on these properties, which he would do from time to time, that he was basically sequestered. So he and Peaches were kind of forced into a meeting at, I can't remember what hotel, but some hotel conference room. And basically the objective was, because if Sam didn't do anything with this building, the company had moved its operations elsewhere, and they planned to demolish the building, which is
horrible.
Well, it would have ended any dream of creating an old market that was was
Right.
that would have been it. And if you think about kind of the story of the old market, which is a story of downtown Omaha, which is a story of Omaha, and there is a sort of relentless, unyielding, merciless destruction of all things historical. There's virtually no sense of what the town looked like, 80 years ago. And so the reality was that the bulldozers were parked in the alleyway out back, and the demolitions was supposed to start
They were ready to go.
imminently. They were ready to go. And so the fact that Sam was able to sign an LOI, ultimately opened a restaurant despite having no restaurant experience, despite living halfway around the world, acquiring the building, and then making that the French Cafe. The French Cafe was very popular
Yeah.
right from the very beginning. Maybe
I mean, where else was I going to get my escargot?
Yeah, well, yeah. There was an unexpected desire for escargot in Omaha, and so I think it caught him a little off guard, but it was tremendously successful and kind of helped spearhead the neighborhood. And if there is no French Cafe, in other words, if the building had been demolished, there'd be no French Cafe. There's no French Cafe. There's no old market. And if there's no old market, I'm certainly not here.
Right.
I mean, it's something which is I'm utterly connected to. It's the only real piece, I think, that connects this town as a thread back to what it once was. And I think that's why people still find themselves down here, even when they don't know exactly why. That's why people feel like they need to take pictures in the alleyway next to those old brick buildings.
Well, you're not going to find that anywhere else in Omaha, but
You can't,
here.
yeah.
Which leads me to, how'd you get here? You're kind of known as the liaison of chefs here in Omaha, and I know that the last time we chatted it up, which was actually kind of fun, you guys popped in. We were at the green room. This was kind of end of February, right
Yeah.
before the whole coronavirus thing
That's
hit.
right.
You guys popped in, and it was great that you were just able to jump on the mic and go and talk about hospitality and all
Yeah,
that stuff. So
yeah.
that was awesome. But where did you start, and then how did you get here to downtown Omaha
There are
at this restaurant?
There are a lot of different steps, but
I'll take some more wine too.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of different steps, but really, I mean, the thing that happened that's most meaningful is that I got connected to Mark and Vera. So Mark Mercer, Sam's son. So just real briefly, so then Sam had the French Cafe,
Yep.
then sells the French Cafe about 5 years later to Michael Harrison, who then, when he passes away, I don't know if they were partners or what before then, but for sure, Tony Abbott then runs the French Cafe until the French Cafe closes.
Gotcha.
That's the sort of rest of the storyline there.
And I remember when that happened, and everybody was kind of outraged, just like, "Oh my gosh, this is closing!" No way.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's an institution, so of course people are going to be kind of taken aback.
Well, yeah.
But I'll get to that stuff in a minute. So in the meantime, I kind of forged my own path. I'm not a culinary school graduate. I've got a degree in physics. I got a degree in French. I did not expect to be in restaurants my whole life. Although when I first started working at 19 or whatever, like on the line cooking, I couldn't picture myself not being a part of restaurants. So
Sure.
kind of wrestled with that a lot through my 20s, and kind of went here and there. But really, the place I feel like where it all came together, where it all kind of made sense, is I'd come back from a stint in D.C. where I was working at a restaurant and had an opportunity to kind of take over the food operations at La Bouvette, which was owned by Mark and Vera. And I worked there for a little bit before leaving to go to D.C., and I think I'd like to say forged a pretty good relationship with Mark and Vera. And I went away and I kind of couldn't get that out of my mind. There's something about Bouvette which is very insidious like that. Like you
And
can't.
they're actually located just right
They're
around the
around the
corner.
corner, yeah.
They're just right here.
So for everybody listening, there's a place called La Bouvette, which is a little wine bar and cafe. And we are Le Bouillon, which is a French accented restaurant in the old French Cafe space, which are different places, and we get confused all the time for all different sort of wonderful reasons.
I may have taken part in that today.
It may be something that I'm accustomed to correcting.
Right.
I love the place. It's absolutely just near and dear to my heart. But so I'd worked there for a little spell, and then went to DC, and then kind of came back under this impression that Mark and Vera were expecting to kind of open up the food operations. I don't know if you're familiar with how long Bouvette's been open. It's been open forever.
As far as I know, it's been open for 25, 30 years.
Yeah, that's about right. So, and this is already 10 plus years in, and so I come back and I remember going into a meeting in front of Mark and Vera, and they say, "So what do you propose?" I thought, "What do I propose?" I thought this is what you wanted, but we were able to really transform. That was a very transformative moment at La Bouvette, because that was really when the front doors that we sort of can't not imagine Bouvette having. That's when those were open. That's when it really kind of took on a true cafe experience. That's when pretty much everything on the right-hand side of the menu came to pass. So a big leap forward, a giant step in its evolution.
And you were part of that main process of creating that
yeah,
menu.
yeah. I mean, that was probably not going to happen on its own. I mean, who knows? Things could have happened, but I remember that's what I proposed to them, and they said, "Okay, fine, well, go do
ahead."
it.
Yeah.
You have at it."
What do you need?
And no, it was like go do it.
Oh,
And
go do it. Gotcha.
And then but just working with them was tremendous. Mark has passed away. He passed away last fall. But we were kind of watching things happen in Bouvette, because Bouvette had already gone through a period right before then where it was really kind of touch and go about whether there was any more joy to do it for them.
Sure.
And I think it was great to see how excited they were, kind of where Bouvette had this new life, this new breath of fresh air, and then a couple years later, I remember thinking, well, I'm at a crossroads in my life. What am I going to do next? What's the next sort of phase? And I contemplated, the person whose restaurant I was working at in DC had reached out to me about taking over a new project for him, and I remember just thinking, well, what's the next, what happens
What would
next?
I do after that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Bouvette is beautiful, but it's sort of also like Never Neverland. You can sort of, you'll be there, and then time just kind of goes by, and the next thing you know, you're like, oh, I got to.
It's been 3.5 hours. I got to go.
No, I mean, it's been like 10 years. And I need to go.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what
I see what you're
like,
saying.
Like, you don't realize, oh, I'm now 43 years old, and what's next? What's the next step? So I remember thinking maybe I would try to open a restaurant. I kind of always had that dream. And I remember Mark saying, well, I've got this space that I really want something to happen in.
But it has to be done right.
Well, I mean, that was sort of just, I don't think Mark would have ever, I don't think he would have ever said anything had he not thought that we could do something right there.
Sure.
And I remember he took me down through the bowels of the Bemis building, down on 11th and Jones. We went kind of all the way back through, weaved around, and then we go into what was the boiler room of the Bemis building. And it was just like a rush, like, oh yeah, this would be the most spectacular space in America if we could make this happen. And then we started embarking on that project. And
you're talking about the Bemis building by the First National Bank Tower. Isn't that where it's at? It's like 16th Street.
No,
am I wrong on that?
You might be thinking Beacons. There's an old Beacons over there, but no, the Bemis building, the Bemis bag building, the bag factory's on 11th and Jones.
11th and Jones, gotcha.
It was, abandoned, I want to say, in like the 70s, early 70s.
I'm thinking of the Brandeis building.
You're thinking Brandeis building.
That's
Yeah,
what
there you go.
that is.
Yeah, no, so this was not a
Not the
retail
Brandeis.
this was not a retail space at all. This was a super industrial heavy space. In the meantime, in the early so the Bemis company leaves that building just like everywhere else. I mean, everything downtown was abandoned. Almost everything was demolished. I mean, almost everything. If you take a look at a picture of downtown Omaha from 1944, I bet there's not 10% left. I bet it's like 5% is left from that time frame. And actually, you can go outside when this whole thing's done. You can go to the King shop down the street.
I'm out.
And you'll see. I mean, it's like, and I'm from Berlin, and one of the things that in the sort of the 80s and stuff, you'd go to like town, and it would say, Württemberg was like leveled 90% or 95%. Like so much of the towns were leveled during Allied bombings, etc.
Sure.
Berlin, obviously, not spared by the war. And then I look at Omaha, it's like, not really touched by the war, but we managed to annihilate 95% of it anyway.
Yeah.
to our own sort of, I think, I feel like terrible about how that transpired. But
Well, we all wish that it could have stayed, a lot more memorable and true to its roots.
yeah, I wish that there would have been a pathway where we could have had our cake and eat it too, where we could have had, that this town wouldn't resemble a parking lot as opposed to a vibrant downtown. But
Sure.
that's a separate story.
Yeah.
So when so when Mark had proposed this space, and just thinking like, man, this is gonna be remarkable, we embarked on this thing, and it was a kind of brick by brick, slow moving but very deliberate development, and then we caught up with 2008, the end of 2008, the recession hits, like kind of like just right now, like this boom.
Yeah. Hit you in
And
the
there's
gut.
there's an implosion, but we're like on the precipice of opening. The recession doesn't hit Nebraska until like early 2009, and we opened January 26, 2009. And if you happen to remember 2009, it was an insanely cold and snowy and bitter and dark and depressing winter. And so here we are, we're opening a white tablecloth restaurant. offering-
Famine is coming.
Well-
Omaha is closing down.
Well, I mean, it was also a period where, the restaurant was ambitious. It was attempting to do something that, not like it was inventing the wheel. It was just trying to bring to Omaha concepts that had been sort of already normalized in most food-friendly towns, and Omaha hadn't embraced any of it.
Excuse me. What was the name of the restaurant?
The Boiler Room.
The Boiler Room. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, the name was sort of pretty self time. It's so funny. I'm so terrible with names because Mark, I would, hey Mark, what do you think about this? In retrospect, super stupid name. And Mark was like, he wouldn't say. He just kind of twirled his hair. And, well, Boiler Room makes a lot of sense. Yeah, duh. Boiler Room makes all the sense in the world.
Right. Since it's down in the boiler room.
I mean, it's like you walk in, you're like, the boiler was this giant feature of the old spaces. Everything down there is just so massive. It was just like, it's such a stark reminder of how things used to be done
Yes.
and how things are done now. I mean, if you see the timbers, when you see the floorboards, when you see the joists, when you see like the boiler, not the boiler, but the furnace down there was like 1/4-inch plate steel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Everything on the concrete that was on the floor that we had to cut through was like 4-inch square rebar. It was just, everything was so massive and durable and infinite, So anyway, so Boiler Room opens up in this like insanely bleak period, and and it's like we're attempting to do this sort of on the fly. This is like how fortunate we were, because the recession was so deep and terrible. I remember getting this envelope with a resume inside, and I open it up, and it's like, oh, it's Jesse Becker, MS, and oh, that's a master sommelier, and a master sommelier wants to work at the Boiler Room.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think we could probably make room
Yeah,
for
we'll
him.
we'll swing it.
We'll make that. Yeah, okay, sure, I suppose. So here we got this MS, and we're walking the floor, and it's and I mean this with all due respect, like people just didn't seem to understand what we were doing.
Right.
It was
above their heads.
and let me also point some blame at me. Like I think we were trying to figure this out. We had a staff that really didn't have a lot of the experience that we needed. With, Jesse and some other people, but by and large, the staff didn't know what to do, and so we were just all kind of learning on the fly. But I mean, the guests would say things. I remember hearing something where someone said like, I ate at Gary Danko the other week, and I don't know if you're familiar with restaurant Gary Danko.
No, I don't actually. Oh, in San Francisco.
Yeah.
That's why I wouldn't know.
And I was like, oh, that sounds fantastic. And then he made some recommendation. Well, you should do this. They do this, and you should do this. And I think, I could do that.
But I don't want to copy him.
Well, no, but I'd have to take your bill and let me put a 0 behind it.
Right.
Because that's how that works.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think we're doing here, but you're getting it at a 90% bargain. So
Yeah.
you can accept kind of what's happening here at the rate that we're, because like the other, and this is the most
And
profound.
was it because they were coastal?
I think it was because no, these are Omahans. These are people who live here in town. You need to fix that.
Yeah,
like-
bear with me. Go ahead.
For sure.
Keep talking then.
No, I mean, so what was so fascinating about kind of people's understanding of what sort of level of dining we were trying to accomplish we were so, I mean, it was definitely an outlier type restaurant at the time. And, you know, we were doing something where even the food writer at the World Herald, I remember her piece that she wrote, she said, it's as if they're asking you to order a first course, main course, cheese, and dessert. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's pretty much accurate. I don't know why that would be considered an indictment of the place.
Sure.
Anyway, so it was a tough year. We learned. We had to adapt. We prevailed, I think, and I think the restaurant stays as one of the kind of pillar places, most important places in town as a result. And so many people, I mean, from the very beginning, I thought that the Boiler Room's principal objective, its sort of measurement of success, being a little bit insulated, being protected by the fact that, you know, Mark and Vera own the property and it's their restaurant and they have the ability to, you know, handle things a little bit different as, you know, owners than property owners than maybe other people do who are just signing rent checks. That I felt like there was a little bit more insulation on the financials.
Sure.
But
you felt a lot more comfortable.
There wasn't the same level of, you know, hey, this needs to be like, here's our debt load, you got to pay this off, like, you know, pressure. It was a little bit more, and wonderfully so, about being a place that was right, about a place that was beautiful, it was executing the way it should be, and of course it couldn't, you know, hemorrhage money, it couldn't lose money, but
right.
It wasn't like the return. Anyway, so
you didn't have much pressure.
Oh, there was an insane amount of pressure, but from a different angle. It wasn't, you know, the success or failure of the restaurant was razor thin, because there was, I mean, like, I'll be real frank, there was almost zero built-in demand for that kind of restaurant in 2009.
Sure.
There just wasn't. And I think one of the things our community struggles with to this day is kind of understanding what a place is trying to accomplish and sort of giving a place the benefit of the doubt. You know, that I think there was an era previous, straight talk, there was an era previous to what I think of like now, sort of bookending with starting 2009, kind of ending maybe right now, which is maybe more hallmark or kind of more characterized by restaurant people maybe not being totally forthcoming about what they were doing. I know, because that's where I came up. Those are the kitchens I came up in.
Sure.
And I'm not going to name any names, but if it's a restaurant from that previous period that was really noteworthy, I mean, if you look at all those menus from that period, you know, like we'll call it 1990 to 2009, almost all of them are more expensive than the best restaurants now, not with adjusted inflation, but like dollar for dollar. So if you look at a place like what the French Cafe was doing, or Café de Copia, you know, places that have closed or whatever, Café de Paris, it was more expensive. It was more expensive in those dollars to dine than it would be at Au Courant or Boiler Room or V Mertz or Bouillon today, in real dollars.
Right.
And yet now we actually have an entirely different tier of product and sort of server awareness and hospitality training, and there's a whole different level of beverage knowledge that people bring to the table.
Absolutely. Craft cocktails.
Without question.
You know,
Like
wine pairings, craft cocktail pairings.
Do you understand that when Boiler Room opened, no one in town squeezed citrus for a cocktail?
It's ridiculous.
It seems ridiculous, but it was the standard practice. So
Yeah.
you had the dumb, like, squeezable lime juice
Sure.
as opposed to using citrus. I mean, these are just simple, super basic, standard.
Simple syrup.
I mean, well, yeah. But you know what I mean? Just the fact that you couldn't get just the most simplest, well-made thing. That was part of what drove. That was a fire that drove me to make Boiler Room meaningful. And again, its measure of success was the number of people who came up, out, and through the Boiler Room system. People who went on to open Ika and open French Bulldog and, you know, help open Modern Love and kind of all around the city. There's this huge array of people, including the people who are still at that restaurant, that are, I think, just testaments to that generation of restaurant person who is utterly committed to their craft. Utterly committed to their craft. And so for a guest, it's the best, it's a golden age, because you can sit back and you can say, hey man, I'm not a tailor. You make the suit to fit me.
Right.
And we can do that.
That's why I came here.
That's why we
You
came
do
here.
that
Yeah,
for
exactly.
Yeah.
And it was a huge revolution. And so, you know, I mean, we were working together at Boiler Room. That is to say, Mark Veer and I. And then the French Cafe closed. And there was a lot of question about, well, what happens next in this space? This is a very important space. I had worked at the French Cafe. I feel like the Old Market is, again, it's the most important neighborhood in the most important city in the state of Nebraska. I've lived down here for 20-ish years, you know. So, I mean, it's kind of a vital place to me. And so I wanted to bring a life that wasn't quite so stiff, wasn't so predicated on being fancy or seeming like it was fancy.
Sure.
But still executing at a high level. And that's kind of where that project kind of started. So it was Mark Veer and I that were planning on kind of doing something here in the French Cafe space. That's why the paintings from Sam are kind of on permanent loan here. That's why the statue from Nick is on permanent loan here, because that was like the first.
I'm glad, yeah.
But that was like the
Glad that's
first
here.
decision that was made. It's like, okay, well, the paintings are coming out, and then the statue's coming out. And then after a couple of months, both Mark and Veer were very, very gracious, and they offered me the restaurant. If you like to go on, we can arrange something, and that's what happened. So then,
Sure.
so now so this is now 2013, where it's like, oh, I'm now like left the nest and am on my own, and a brand new steep learning curve. and
Uphill
how-
battle for
yeah,
you.
and how things go, and that was 2013, and here we are in 2020, as we kind of round a 6.5-year mark, and yeah, just trying to each year, each sort of 3-month increment, I think is how I look at it. It's like we need to focus on something that we do better every couple months.
Right. Well, you're going with the seasons.
It's not just about the seasons. It's like you need to know how you handle any kind of scenario better, because it's like restaurants are entropy and hyperdrive. So there's always something going wrong. There's always something breaking down. There's so many different guests. You know, Omaha's a pretty small city, so it's not like you have a similar type guest all the time. It's like, oh yeah, well, these are clearly people from the finance district who are here, you know, over lunch. Like, no. You have, from one table to the next, totally different expectations, totally different understanding, completely different. I mean, you couldn't get any further apart from like somebody with their kid who just wants to be like, I don't know, why don't we get too fussy? And then somebody who's, you know, celebrating their 60th and whatever. So it's as wide a spectrum, and it's not just bouillon. This is sort of common in restaurants that are kind of hitting that grand middle, not exclusive fine dining restaurants,
Right.
but also not, you know, not like throw peanut shells on the floor type restaurant. So, you know, there's like a huge gray area in the middle, and that's where, you know, we as restaurant people have to figure out how to adapt to the guests' needs, but without sacrificing who you are. I mean, that is. So yeah, so then, you know, it was, well, okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself. So the whole point is just figure out something that's important to you, meaningful to you, and then
Be the best at it.
fixate it until you do it perfectly.
Right.
And that way, every time somebody comes in the restaurant, you can say with confidence that it was better than the last time. And if that's the case, then you can say every time is the best time they've ever eaten in the restaurant. You
So
know, that's the goal.
To be honest with you, the last time I was in this restaurant was back in November.
Mhm.
This happened to be, I think, right when the Gatsby was trying to open up.
Oh, yeah.
My father and I and a family friend and all of our wives all came out, had a fantastic
Oh,
time
great.
here. The wine was amazing. The food was amazing.
Thanks.
Everybody had. It was probably the second time I've eaten here, and it was amazing.
Thank you.
So you've kept your reputation. You've kept your ambiance of great food and great wine. And kudos to you for
Thanks.
doing that.
Thank you.
So, just for some of the people out there knowing what's going on,
Sure.
You are serving food here still to go?
Yeah, so I mean, the city right now has an order saying that no one's allowed to dine in. So we have kind of pivoted, and what we're doing is because we do have a lot of dishes that travel pretty well that are kind of because our inspiration is not the fussy French food.
Right.
Our inspiration, because I've lived in France and
The
I've
duck
cooked in
en
Fran-
fouet?
Yeah, I mean, there's what we do at cassoulet, right? So cassoulet is a dish that has duck confit in it. It has a sausage we make here and a pork belly in it and beans, kind of a stew. It's a perfect thing to reheat.
Sure.
It's like awesome. And we do it in the true way, the way that they do in Castelnaudary in southwestern France and Languedoc. So what we want to do is take quality products, treat them earnestly, not be fussy about it, and just give people like really crisp, articulate, delicious flavors. It's straightforward as far as I'm concerned. And so we're taking that concept to whatever we're doing on the road. So we have a meal plan, so people can go to our website, which is just Bouillon Omaha. Real quick note, it's Bouill. A lot of people want to put the I after. That's bouillon, like gold bullion, as opposed to.
And if you're watching this video, I actually labeled it La Bouillon, so they know the correct spelling. of it.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
and I mean this because I mean people who mean the best will inadvertently introduce an I in the wrong spot.
Sure.
Because it's French and there's just nothing but vowels and that's what it sounds like. So, but yeah, so you can go to the website, you can order everything. We already were delivering wine from the shop, so people were already calling in and setting up orders, and we would send boxes to them. I would deliver boxes to them. We've just expanded that now for the restaurant too, so you can go online, you can place an order, and then we'll bring it to you. We
That's
also do
great.
curbside, yeah. So, and when I say we'll bring it to you, I mean Sunday's an example. I went from Chalco to East Council Bluffs, so you can go the entire metro area, and we'll set up a time. We'll get it to you. Our goal is to do whatever we can to try to make sure people still are able to enjoy what we do, that we can continue working and operating, and so yeah.
Well, in this time of sorrow with coronavirus going on, I understand that you guys are trying to outsource and trying to figure out new ways of keeping the cash flow coming in, and one of them is delivery service, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity for us to buckle down on the things that we already do, because packaging has its own challenges. You want to make sure that things are in a good spot when they arrive at the destination. So it's a full-blown challenge to pivot your entire business model in 24 hours, which is basically where we were this point last week.
Right.
I am unbelievably grateful to the team we have here who made it their mission to make that possible and to ease that transition. I'm super, super thankful for the community, for the support that they've shown us, and for the well-wishing, the kind of the circling the wagons, the commitment to buying local and working with because I mean our restaurant also sources from other producers that are local. So
Yeah.
it is an aggregate economy. So that's very, very, very special and meaningful to me. And we hope everybody stays healthy. We want to be able to we are very super diligent about how we handle the products here, so that
Staying
people-
6 feet away from each other.
6 feet away, but wiping everything down, every sanitizer
Exactly.
everywhere, and all this kind of stuff, and gloves, and wherever we can. To just really, we don't want anyone to inadvertently contract anything, and so if staying home is what makes that possible, and we can bring what we do to them, we can make that happen.
So is it's not a full menu that's online, is it? Kind
It's
of a
pretty close.
Pretty darn close to a full
Yeah,
menu.
if you, I don't know, you got your iPad there, you can check it out. But it's, what we have, we've made the ease of operation such that it's like a couple of clicks and you're good to go. So we have the meal
Sure.
plan, we've got a couple other things, but there's plenty of a la carte type items too. I think there might be like 14, 15 different type dishes that we think really travel well. A good array of dishes too, so that you can order shrimp roll and cassoulet, or you can order. I mean, honestly, we do have a killer burger, but we can do a burger. We do like a chicken in crepe, which is kind of a chicken in a mustard cream sauce with herb crepes next to it, and so dishes that are maybe a little bit more interesting, maybe not so easy to execute at home. We've priced everything so that it's as reasonable as we could possibly make it. Deliveries included, so unlike some of the services, we don't
There's
charge
not an extra fee.
We don't charge the driver fee, the percentage, the blah 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 blah.
If you do want to tip, though.
Yeah, so if you do want to tip right now, that is the one sort of glitch in our system. So we're working on that from the electronic site. People have been very gracious. They've been leaving envelopes and things like that. So
That's great.
that's very, very kind.
And then you also do wine here.
Oh, yeah.
So is that available online, or is that something you have to call in?
So our inventory is not available online. If you order from Le Bouillon, we have the option of, you can have the option of adding a white or red. That's just sort of built in, and we have those selected for you. If you want, I'm very proud of what Howard Street Wine is. That's the bottle shop that we opened. So going back to French Cafe terms,
Sure.
when we opened the restaurant, Le Bouillon, we wanted to do that in kind of what's considered the main dining room, which is where the French Cafe was when it first opened. When Sam sold the restaurant in the 70s, then it kind of spilled over into the next bay to the east, and that's where the entrance kind of turned out to be. So for most people who remember the French Cafe, they remember kind of going through the 1013 door, which is a little bit more recessed, and you kind of go through a little bit of a corridor, and then you turn a corner, and then there was a host stand, the bar area, blah, blah, blah. So
Then it became like the underground or something like that.
well, and then in addition to all that, there was the underground bar,
Yep.
which was in the basement. So what we did is we kind of said, okay, we're going to take the restaurant, and we're going to put the restaurant in where the restaurant once upon a time was, and we're going to bring the door back to where the restaurant once upon a time was. So that's 1017. And then the 1013 door, which is basically kind of self-contained, self-confined, operates as Howard Street Wine Merchant. And so it's a full-blown bottle shop. We've got spirits and a little bit of beer. Really cool selection of producers and wines. Honestly, you're probably, if you want to have a conversation about wine, or you want to try something maybe a little bit different, or if you want to trust people who literally spend all day, every day thinking about the subject, that's what the shop is. So from both of these are examples of wines that are really, classic appellations from classic producers, or relatively classic. This winery was established a little bit more recently, but like Jean-Paul
Which is
Thévenet,
fantastic.
it's delicious, right? But we want wines that are fresh tasting, that are made not exclusively organically, but everybody who's on our shelves is a winemaker who's very circumspect about, using herbicides, pesticides, best practices, that kind of thing. So, we really believe, just like with the food sourcing, we don't want to find something which is coming from people. The whole chain of custody of food is what matters to me now. So, whether it's the first person kind of behind the boat that's pulling in whatever the fish is, to the server who's bringing it to your table, or myself bringing it in a box to you and putting it on your porch. With wine, it's a little tricky because you don't know anything about it. It's just a label. It's just words printed on a sheet of paper. So
Right. There are websites you can go to possibly
for
get,
sure. For sure,
information.
you can dig back through. You can Google the names, and I super duper encourage people to do that. But at the same time, what we're doing is we're kind of selecting into producers that we think fall into that sort of general mindset. And some of those are more classic appellations and classic producers. Some of them are part of a new movement of.
I'll take more.
Here, you got it. Sort of this movement of.
I'm not gonna let this go to waste.
Please. People call it natural wine, but it's, maybe people are a little bit more kind of fighting with the appellation, so they're more interested in kind of working in a specific way that they feel like is more true to the origins of how wine was once made, and blah blah blah. So we can have that conversation. So styles of wines that are
Is that your Fitbit going off? You gotta go run a mile?
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't got my steps in today. I haven't got my steps in a week, as it turns out. But whatever. Yeah. So we're really trying to stay a step in front of where, kind of what we're putting on the shelves and kind of what we get to offer. I think we've got a world-class level wine
looks amazing to me. And do we want to go into what you were possibly? I mentioned something.
Yeah.
There's a staircase, and I was kind of
There is
wondering
a
what that was all.
staircase.
What's that
Yeah,
all? What's
so-
that? Where's that go?
So I mean, yeah. So if you can kind of picture back to again French Cafe sort of space analogy. So we took Howard Street Wine and put it in basically what was the old entrance, part of the wood room, and the fireplace room, the cloakroom. Kind of nuked that space. There's a staircase now, which is far more visible than it once was, that leads downstairs. And so it was totally our intention of opening that up.
Which
to-
we were talking earlier was the
Yeah.
space of the underground.
That was the underground, and the underground went through its own evolution too. Over time. I mean, remember the French Cafe was open for 45 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane. So, so there are different rooms downstairs too, and
Which
we're-
I'm glad it's not the underground anymore. I mean, it was a wonderful but terrible place,
I have many non-memories there too.
right?
But that there are rooms down there that I think we can occupy and do some really fun things with. We've already done a few. We call them wine bar pop-ups. We call it Bar Cave or Bar Cave. So if people follow us on Facebook or Instagram, Howard Street Wine on Facebook or Instagram, we will let people know when we're doing these events. And right now we were trying to kind of keep on a month every month clip. We obviously have an interruption right now.
Yeah.
so
Which we understand.
Which we'll see how long this is going to make sense. But it was definitely our intention of kind of moving more towards having that more regularly open as a kind of a natural wine bar. So.
So now that we've kind of run the gamut of history in Omaha, French Cafe, you getting here, let's kind of dive into the coronavirus and how it's affecting you. And I understand that it's affecting everyone in every business. I have a good family friend that recently opened a restaurant, and it's hard going. I mean, you open a restaurant in February, and here you are. Couple weeks later, and it's unfortunate. And they're doing their best to cater to the people, and we kind of talked on that. But what are you doing to move forward? And then what are you going to do to keep it? What are you learning about this? Like, are you going to keep delivery? And what are you going to do different now that this once it's over, I guess?
Yeah, a lot of that depends on. Obviously, there's some huge staff implications that this has. And
Sure.
some
I mean, you had to, I'm
really
sure, furlough a lot of your staff
really
around
tough,
here.
Yeah, really tough decisions we've had to make with staff, and but the uncertainty of what we're facing is at least 50% of the problem.
Sure.
It's eventually, I have full confidence. Eventually, the curve will flatten, and enough people will get the disease and recover from the disease that immunization will have become more widespread. So I'm not concerned that everyone's going to die from this thing, but I don't know what we're looking like at the other end of it. So, what we're trying to do is it's another opportunity to tighten up every little bit of our operations, making dishes that make sense, that really, really, really sort of harken back to who we are and what we are. And, you get to kind of focus in and double down on the things that you feel like are really important to you. And so, we're doing that from a curbside and delivery menu right now. I think when we get back to the other side of things, I think it's an opportunity to, again, be a place that's really, really tightly focused on the things that we love to do the most. So I'd say that right now, people are getting a preview of the things that we believe in, really, truly, heartily believe in. And you can probably see more of that on the other end of the restaurant.
Nice. Is there any other things you want to put out there for Omaha to
man.
know? I mean, I know we could probably talk for
You got
another
to be
2 hours.
careful. You got to open-ended questions like that are just going to get us both in trouble. So
Right. But is there anything that you want Omaha or the general public out there in the entire world to know about you and anything coming up?
yeah, I mean,
about
I'd
this
also
restaurant?
I didn't get a chance to talk about this, but in sort of the timeline here, I was able to open a restaurant called Via Farina, which is on 10th and Pacific. So that's a wood-fired pizza, fresh-made pasta restaurant. So
10th and Pacific. There was a Banana Joe there? Is that-
yeah. Now keep going up the hill. There's Blue Barn Theater in the new
Yes.
Boxcar 10 building, and then next door to that is Via Farina.
There you go. Perfect.
And yeah, and so that's another great option for for delivery and for carry out, and I'm telling you, the pizza and pasta has never been better there. So
You know what? They had you guys do bicycle deliveries and stuff like that.
we were doing Vespa deliveries. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've seen those
Yeah,
before.
That's right.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
That's the branding for sure.
So check that place out. Check this
Absolutely.
place out. Please, in this time of not prosperity, that would be a wrong word, but
Whatever the opposite of that is.
exactly. In this time,
Hardship.
in this time of
Yeah.
hardship, and if you want a great meal, please reach out to Paul down here at La Bouvette.
Bouillon.
La Bouillon. See, here it is.
Le Bouillon.
La Bouillon. And it's worded in the title of the show, so they can't get it wrong. Please check out their menu online. Check out their wine. They are open for business,
Yeah.
and they will take your order and they will personally deliver it right to your door. You'll deliver it.
Yeah,
That's
right.
great.
Yeah.
Now that people know that you're delivering, they're probably going to have to sit down and chat with you for a while. You're like, I got other things I got to do.
Be careful. I'm a talker.
It's been great.
My pleasure's mine.
Yeah, I'm Britt.
I'm Paul.
Perfect. This is an episode of Drink Talk. Thanks for watching, and check us out tomorrow where we go to Pint